Welcome to the Rooted Path Global Podcast, a formation conversation for pastors, denominational leaders, and funders who believe their church is not broken. It is unformed. Hi, I'm A. Damian Kurd, founder of Kingdom Assets LLC and the creator of The Rooted Path. Every episode moves in sequence because sequence is not cosmetic. Sequence is formation. Let us begin.
Imagine a room full of people who actually possess absolutely everything they need to survive a crisis.
Right.
Like, you've got experienced trauma nurses, master builders, brilliant logistical organizers,
Yeah.
people with deep political connections, or even just people with empty acres of land.
Yeah. Massive resources.
Exactly. But here's the catch. They are completely blind to each other's existence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They sit shoulder to shoulder every single week. But because of the way their social environment is structured, they're basically operating with systemic community amnesia.
Which is, it's wild, right?
It is. And so today's deep dive is all about that bizarre, almost tragic phenomenon of collective blindness. And more importantly, the really fascinating digital operating system that's been built to cure it.
And it's a condition that plagues almost every kind of community gathering you can think of, honestly.
Right. Secular, religious, whatever.
Exactly. You have this massive latent capacity resting just beneath the surface, but the social architecture actually prevents it from being recognized. Or mobilized, for that matter.
Yeah, and to really understand how this is being solved, we have to ground you, the listener, in a very specific, vivid memory.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you've probably been in one of these rooms. You know the exact dynamic I'm talking about. Imagine the distinct, sharp, almost metallic smell of fresh butcher paper.
Oh, yeah. The big roll.
Yeah, just aggressively unrolled and taped across a long cinder block wall. You hear the crinkling echo of the paper and then...
Cutting right through the low murmur of dozens of voices.
Yes, that unmistakable high-pitched squeak of a brand new Sharpie marker dragging across it.
It's so visceral.
It really is. We are landing right inside a church basement or maybe a fellowship hall on a crisp Saturday morning.
With the stale powdered donuts on a folding table.
And the coffee brewing in that massive industrial urn. You know the one.
Oh, I know the one.
There is this palpable, crackling energy in the room. And before we analyze any data or software today, you really have to feel the reality of that physical space.
You really do, because that environment is a universal touchstone for anyone who has done, congregational organizing or grassroots facilitation over the last 30 years.
Right.
The scent of the markers alone is like a trigger for communal memory. And it's essential that we start there.
Because of the source material we're looking at today.
Exactly. The internal steering document we are analyzing today from the Rooted Path, which is an organization that has pioneered a lot of this work. It's entirely rooted in what happens in that specific room.
Yeah. And we are tracking their evolution from those physical communal exercises, the butcher paper and the sticky notes, to a new field infrastructure they call Giftscape Digital.
And that's Giftscape. 2 words.
Right. Giftscape Digital. And right out of the gate, I want to clarify something that really struck me in the documentation. We aren't just talking about a group of people listing their hobbies, are we?
Not at all.
The document describes this Saturday morning exercise as a profoundly disruptive sociological and psychological event. They actually call it the body seeing itself.
And the profundity of that phrase cannot be overstated. Think about the default architecture of a standard congregational or community gathering.
Okay, yeah.
For years, these individuals have gathered in rows. The physical orientation of the room completely dictates their experience.
Right, they all face forward.
Exactly. They face forward looking at a single leader, a pastor, a speaker. They know the backs of each other's heads.
Maybe they know each other's first names.
Right, maybe what they do for a living in the vaguest possible sense. The interaction is largely superficial by design.
It's polite. It's safe.
Very safe. But when you hand them that Sharpie, when they are asked to actively write down what they can offer...
Cecile's talents.
Quietly held abilities they've carried for decades that no one has ever asked them about. And then, this is the key part, place that physical note on the wall. The entire dynamic fractures. It shifts from passive, consumer-oriented observation to active, visible contribution. It creates a legitimate shock of recognition.
And that shock is what fascinates me so much. You're standing there, right, holding your lukewarm coffee in a styrofoam cup, staring at a yellow square of paper on the wall.
Yeah.
And you realize you have been sitting next to a trauma nurse for 5 years and never knew it.
Exactly. Or you discover that the quiet guy who always folds the bulletins on Sunday morning.
He's a 20-year master contractor who runs a massive crew.
Right. Or the woman who smiles politely during the greeting time is a classically trained drummer. The assumption that you are just a room full of ordinary passive spectators, it shatters instantly.
It shatters because you are confronted with visual, undeniable evidence of the organism's complexity.
Yes. You realize the community is an incredibly resource-rich entity. But up until that specific Saturday morning, the organism has been functionally blind to its own anatomy.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
The sticky note wall acts as a mirror. The body is finally seeing its own hands, its own feet, its own capacity to act in the world.
You know, it reminds me of the way we use smartphones.
Okay, how so?
Imagine someone has a top-of-the-line smartphone, right, with 100 incredible, powerful apps installed on it. High-definition camera, complex financial software, architectural rendering tools.
A global communication network.
Exactly. But the user only knows how to make phone calls.
Oh, wow.
The hardware is there. The software is installed. The capacity is absolutely staggering. But because they don't know how to access the dashboard, because they've never swiped past the home screen, all of that capacity is entirely wasted.
They're holding a supercomputer and using it as a landline.
Exactly. That's what these communities are doing before the butcher paper goes up, isn't it?
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. The potential energy is immense, but the kinetic energy is zero because there is no interface to reveal the installed capacity.
Right.
The sticky note wall becomes that first crude but highly effective interface.
So if we look at the methodology that Rooted Path uses, there's a linguistic choice in their internal documents that I really want to dissect for a second.
Okay.
They don't call this team building. They don't call it an inventory audit. They use the term formation, and they always capitalize it. Formation work.
Yes, all caps.
By capitalizing that term, they are at least theologically separating this from a secular corporate exercise.
Yeah.
That implies something much deeper is happening than just gathering data to fill volunteer slots.
Right. It is a profound distinction. In the context of their specific theological framework, this is not about data collection. Data collection is a secular extractive process.
Where leadership mines the community for resources.
Exactly, to serve an institutional agenda. Formation, in their theology, posits that what God has placed within the community, within these specific individuals, is being formally recognized and consecrated.
Meaning the act of writing it down is actually changing the person doing the writing.
Precisely. Their theology asserts that the Spirit is actively moving through the physical, vulnerable act of declaration. When a person names their gift, they are participating in their own spiritual maturation. They are claiming their specific divine placement within the body. It is a holy act.
So it's not a means to an end.
No, it is not a prerequisite to the real work of the community. The experience of recognition is the work.
Wait, so if the act of recognition is itself the spiritual formation, then the physical realities of the room, the chaotic bumping of shoulders, the vulnerability of walking up to the wall, breathing the same air.
Yes.
That isn't just window dressing. It's the actual crucible where this formation happens.
The physical environment is inextricably linked to the spiritual outcome. The room undeniably mattered.
Right.
The steering document is foundational in its insistence that you cannot divorce the theology of formation from the physical gathering.
Which makes perfect sense, but it also brings up a massive tension for me, especially when we know this deep dive is ultimately heading toward a digital infrastructure.
Because of the temptation to mock the old ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because there is this overwhelming temptation, particularly in the tech space, to do exactly that. To look back at 30 years of butcher paper and Sharpies and say, oh, look at how quaint and inefficient we used to be with our little pieces of paper. Thank goodness we have an app now.
And we have to be very clear here. The source documentation explicitly forbids that kind of condescension. It demands a posture of absolute reverence for the physical era.
Right. A soft tone.
Yes, a very soft tone throughout. We must rigorously honor the fact that sticky notes were the absolute right tool for their moment. They provided a foundational respect for 3 decades of sincere, difficult, beautiful work.
Yeah.
If you do not respect the wall, you will inevitably misunderstand the digital evolution that followed it.
Okay, let's honor the field then. Let's really analyze what the wall accomplished that made it the reigning champion of community tools for 30 solid years.
I think that's crucial.
Because if we contrast the wall with the alternative, let's say a pastor just emails out a digital survey with a bunch of checkboxes. The differences in human behavior are staggering.
Let's explore that contrast. Because if a leader sends a digital form asking you to list your skills, you fill it out alone.
Right.
You are sitting at your kitchen table, staring at a screen, completely isolated from the community. You click the boxes, you hit submit, and the data vanishes into a spreadsheet that only the leader can access. It is a completely private, sterile interaction.
It's entirely safe. There is zero social risk.
Exactly. It lacks the vulnerability required for genuine community formation. But think about the mechanics of the wall.
Okay.
Writing a deeply held, perhaps previously hidden gift on a brightly colored piece of paper, and then physically walking up to the front of a crowded room to place it on the wall for everyone to see.
Yeah.
That is a radically different psychological event. It is a visible public declaration of identity. You are looking your community in the eye and saying, this is who I am, and this is what I have to offer you.
And once it's on the wall, it can't be unseen. The document notes that, right?
Yes.
It becomes part of the shared, undeniable visual reality of the room. You can't unknow that the guy folding bulletins is a master contractor.
It creates a new shared reality. And the second critical mechanic the document points out is how the wall fundamentally alters the power dynamics of the organization.
Oh, yeah.
It requires leadership to step back.
And that is highly disruptive to normal organizational behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, in almost every traditional model, whether you are looking at a church, a nonprofit, or a corporation, the leader is intentionally positioned as the bottleneck.
Very true.
The pastor or the CEO is the sole source of provision, the primary problem solver, the central node of all intelligence. If something is broken, if a need arises, the entire congregation looks to the front of the room for the solution.
But the wall decenters that entirely. It is a visual refutation of the top-down leadership model.
It's a complete inversion of the pyramid. When the pastor steps back and the congregation steps back, and they all look at this massive, sprawling mosaic of colored paper detailing hundreds of skills, relationships, and assets.
The visual message is undeniable.
Right. The pastor's not the source. The body itself is the source.
And it is exceedingly rare to find organizational frameworks that legitimately require the leadership to step completely out of the way.
Oh, definitely.
Most systems, especially in the tech world, are designed to funnel information up to the executive so they can make more efficient top-down decisions. The genius of the wall was that it funneled information out to the community so the community could recognize itself.
Yeah.
It fostered lateral connection rather than vertical dependence.
And go back to their theology, that physical lateral connection literally required the spirit to move through the room itself.
Yeah.
The community had to interact.
Exactly.
People are reading each other's handwriting, tapping each other on the shoulder. Wait, Sarah, you wrote down that you know how to write grant proposals. Since when?
Yes.
That conversation, that friction, is the formation. The wall held that spiritual movement perfectly for the exact moment it was happening.
The wall was a triumph of sociology and theology. It created the perfect temporary environment for vulnerability, decentralization, and formation. But that word temporary is the pivot point here.
Right, because there is a profound structural vulnerability at the heart of this triumph.
Right.
The mirror works brilliantly when you are standing directly in front of it, reflecting your image back to you in high definition. But what happens to the reflection when you walk away?
It's gone.
Exactly. What happens when Sunday afternoon arrives, the fluorescent lights in the fellowship hall are turned off, and the butcher paper gets rolled up and shoved into a storage closet?
This is where we must transition from what the wall did brilliantly to what it fundamentally lacked. And we have to maintain that posture of honest naming, not harsh critique.
Right, we're not calling it a tragedy.
No, not a tragedy at all. The steering document frames this with profound gentleness. The phrase they use is that the sticky notes did the seeing beautifully, but they could not do the holding.
Seeing versus holding. The mirror analogy fits perfectly here. You have this incredible moment of clarity, but the medium itself cannot retain the image.
Exactly.
Let's break down what the text calls the three lived failures of this era, because these aren't theoretical problems. These are realities that organizers and pastors have bled over for 30 years.
Yeah.
The first failure is that the data did not compound.
Let's look at the actual physics of human memory in a communal setting. A community does this beautiful, transformative Saturday morning exercise. They fill the wall, they weep, they celebrate.
It's a huge moment.
But as time passes, the physical artifact is removed. New people join the congregation in year 2 and year 3.
Right.
Those new members were not in the room. They never saw the wall. They don't know about the trauma nurse or the contractor.
The incredible relational and spiritual energy expended in year 1 is entirely trapped in year 1.
Exactly. Year 3 could never see what year 1 declared. The communal memory evaporated almost the moment the wall came down. The body returned to its state of systemic amnesia.
It's like an architect who is an absolute genius, but for some inexplicable reason, they only draw their world-changing complex blueprints on a foggy mirror in a bathroom after a hot shower.
Oh, that's a vivid image.
Right. The act of drawing it is brilliant. The design is perfect. But the inevitable reality of physics is that the room is going to cool down.
Yes.
And the moment the temperature drops, the fog clears, and the entire blueprint vanishes without a trace. The genius is lost. If you want to build a new room on the house, you have to turn the shower back on, steam up the room, and redraw the entire blueprint from memory.
That is a perfect encapsulation of the exhaustion this methodology produced. You are forcing the community to expend massive amounts of spiritual and emotional energy just to get back to the baseline of what they already knew but forgot.
It's so draining.
It is. Which brings us directly to the second lived failure, which might be the most painful for these organizations.
Okay.
Leadership transitions reset everything.
Oh, this is devastating for any community that loses a beloved leader. Let's really dig into the mechanics of why this hurts so much.
Imagine a pastor who spends 5 or 10 years painstakingly building a mental map of their congregation's gifts. Even if the butcher paper came down, that leader holds a vast amount of relational intelligence in their head.
Right. They know who to call when the roof leaks.
Or when a family is in crisis. But then, inevitably, that leader moves on, retires, or passes away. A new pastor arrives. What exactly does the new pastor inherit?
They inherit a completely blank slate. They inherit the physical building, maybe a spreadsheet of financial donors, but they inherit zero relational intelligence.
They inherit a community that has already done the hard work of declaring its gifts, but because the medium couldn't hold the work, the new leader has no record of it.
Right.
So what is the new pastor forced to do? They schedule a Saturday morning, they buy new butcher paper, they buy new Sharpies, and they ask the congregation to start entirely from scratch.
It's insulting to the congregation, honestly. Not intentionally, but systemically.
Systemically, yes.
The community is being asked to do the emotional labor of revealing themselves, of being vulnerable all over again, just hoping that this time, this new leader will remember. It guarantees that the organization can never mature past the cognitive capacity of its current leader.
Precisely.
And the third failure scales this amnesia out to a macroscopic level. The next congregation reinvented the wheel.
We have to remember that this movement of asset mapping wasn't happening in one isolated basement. It was happening globally. But because the tool was physical paper, the intelligence never carried across the field.
You'd have a church on the north side of a city having a massive breakthrough on a Saturday, figuring out an incredible new way to categorize and mobilize their neighborhood.
And meanwhile, a church just 2 miles down the road on the exact same Saturday is starting from absolute zero. They are stumbling over the exact same hurdles, learning the exact same painful lessons that their neighbors had already solved. There was no compounding wisdom across the field because paper cannot transmit data laterally across geographic boundaries. Every single community was an isolated silo of temporary memory.
This brings us to what the steering document identifies as the load-bearing frame of this entire 30-year era. It is a single, measured sentence that defines the physical wall.
The wall held the moment it could not hold the work.
I want to make sure we don't rush past that. The wall held the moment it could not hold the work. It's not framed as a failure of the people or a failure of the theology.
It is simply a reflection of physics. A sticky note is engineered to be temporary. Its adhesive is specifically designed to let go eventually.
Right.
The wall did exactly what it was built to do. It facilitated a profound temporary environment for spiritual formation. But to demand that a piece of paper act as a generational compounding database is to demand it be something it is not.
So, if the fatal flaw of the physical wall is this systemic, unavoidable amnesia, the obvious question is how to cure the amnesia.
Yes.
How do we make the memory permanent? How do we allow the intelligence to compound over generations without killing the vulnerability and the magic of the physical room?
And that leads us directly to the evolution.
Right. The evolution the rooted path has built.
Yeah.
Let's introduce the infrastructure. It's called Giftscape Digital, and I'm pronouncing that very deliberately as two distinct words. Giftscape Digital.
Yes.
Now, before we look at the mechanics of how it functions, the steering document is incredibly strict about the terminology used to define it. They rely heavily on negative definitions. What is this not?
The locked language here is vital. The document explicitly forbids calling Giftscape Digital a disruption.
Which is so counterintuitive to how we talk about software today. In Silicon Valley, disruption is the ultimate compliment. You disrupt the taxi industry, you disrupt the hotel industry. It implies you broke an archaic system and replaced it with something superior. Why is that word forbidden here?
Because you have to remember the theological core we established earlier. This is formation work.
Okay.
Formation is, by definition, a continuous, deeply rooted, slow process of maturation. You do not disrupt a tree's root system to make it grow faster, you nurture it. To call this digital evolution a disruption would be an insult to the 30 years of sincere foundational work that paved the way for it. It is not breaking the past, it is preserving it.
The document also insists we do not call it a structural container or simply a tech solution. They don't want it framed as just a digital bucket that you dump volunteer data into.
Exactly. A container is passive. The specific mandated terminology is that Giftscape Digital is an operating system or a field infrastructure.
I think we need to define field infrastructure clearly because it can sound like corporate jargon if we aren't careful.
Yeah.
I think of it like a city's electrical grid.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. The actual electricity is generated by the people, by the community's inherent gifts. But if you have a massive power plant and no electrical grid, you can't route the electricity to the neighborhood that's experiencing a blackout.
Yes.
The grid itself doesn't generate the power, but it is the invisible underlying architecture that makes the power usable, scalable, and permanent. It connects the supply to the demand. That's what a field infrastructure does.
Right. That is an excellent analogy. The infrastructure is the routing mechanism. And critically, this is an infrastructure designed specifically for asset mapping that remains rooted firmly in the theology of formation.
Okay, I have to offer some rigorous pushback here.
Please do.
Because this is the tension everyone feels when a deeply human process gets digitized. I'm sorry, but I don't buy that you can just move a deeply intimate, vulnerable communal act onto a sterile digital dashboard without losing the humanity.
It's a common fear.
Right. You cannot tell me that staring at an iPhone screen yields the same spiritual formation as looking a trauma nurse in the eye in a crowded fellowship hall. A software interface is inherently sterile. How does the document actually defend the idea that this digital grid doesn't kill the magic of the room?
It defends it by clarifying the sequence of events. The assumption in your pushback is that the digital screen replaces the physical room.
Right, which is what usually happens with tech.
Yes, but the steering document is absolute on this point. Giftscape Digital does not replace the Saturday morning gathering. The room still matters.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. The community still physically gathers. They still drink the bad coffee. They still discern together, look each other in the eye, and experience the shock of recognition. The spirit moves exactly the same way the wall always allowed.
So the software isn't intercepting the moment of formation.
Precisely. The moment of formation remains tactile and communal. What changes is what happens after the moment. What changes is what gets held.
Okay, I see.
Instead of the data living exclusively on a temporary sticky note that gets thrown away, the exact declarations made in that room are captured and permanently mapped into the digital infrastructure. The screen doesn't replace the room. The screen preserves the room forever.
Okay, that makes sense. It's an archive of the formation, an active memory bank. So let's look at the actual mechanics. How does this operating system categorize the staggering complexity of human being?
Yes, the 5 categories.
The source material outlines 5 exact categories that are captured digitally from session 1. They call this the canonical order. And this is where we need to trace the history a bit, because the first 4 categories come directly from a very famous secular framework called ABCD, Asset-Based Community Development.
Yes, developed by John McKnight and Jody Kretzmann in the early 90s, ABCD was revolutionary because it forced communities to stop focusing on their deficits, what they lacked, what was broken, and start identifying their existing assets. It fundamentally changed community organizing.
Let's walk through how Giftscape Digital maps these, because it's not just listing hobbies. Category 1 is skills.
Skills are the tangible, quantifiable abilities. Carpentry, advanced accounting, graphic design, plumbing, grant writing.
Things you can definitively do.
Exactly. In a digital infrastructure, these become searchable nodes. If the church needs to repair the youth center, the pastor doesn't have to beg for volunteers from the pulpit. They query the infrastructure for plumbing and carpentry and immediately see the 6 people who already declared those skills.
Category 2 is relationships. And this is where mapping gets really interesting digitally.
Relationships acknowledge that a community's wealth is deeply embedded in its network. Does someone have a strong relationship with the local city council? Does someone know the principal at the neighborhood high school?
Or deep ties to the local immigrant community.
Yes. Digitally, this maps the community's reach. You aren't just mapping what the body can do, but who the body can influence and learn from.
Imagine visualizing that on a dashboard. It would look like a massive neural network of civic connections.
It's incredibly powerful.
Category 3 is physical assets.
This moves beyond the individual's mind and body and looks at their material access. Someone might own an empty plot of land, another might have a heavy-duty pickup truck or an industrial sewing machine.
Yeah.
A local business owner in the congregation might have a commercial kitchen that is empty on the weekends. You are taking an inventory of the physical resources resting dormant within the congregation.
And then category 4 is where the psychology of the community really comes into play. Aspirations.
Aspirations map the trajectory of the body. Skills are what you can do today. Aspirations are what you yearn to build tomorrow. The infrastructure asks, what do you care deeply about that we are not currently addressing?
Which is such an important question.
It is. You might have 12 people in a congregation of 400 who quietly harbor an aspiration to start a youth literacy program. But because they sit in different rows and never talk, they don't know they share that dream. When those aspirations are inputted into Giftscape Digital, the system instantly connects those 12 people. It maps hope and then provides the relational architecture to execute it.
It connects the latent demand with the latent supply. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Now, those first 4 skills, relationships, physical assets, aspirations, those map perfectly onto the secular ABCD methodology.
Yeah.
But then we hit the threshold. Category 5.
Yes.
The Rooted Path document highlights this as the absolute crux of their entire field infrastructure. Category 5 is spiritual gifts.
This is the definitive line. The document states explicitly that this 5th category is where traditional ABCD methodology ends and their specific theology of formation begins.
Why is that addition so critical to them? Why aren't the first 4 enough?
Because if you only map the first 4, you are treating the church as merely a socio-economic entity. You are treating it like a very effective Rotary Club or a neighborhood association.
Yeah.
But the Rooted Path framework insists that a faith community is fundamentally different. By integrating spiritual gifts, biblical concepts like hospitality, teaching, discernment, prophecy, healing, administration, they are asserting that the community is a spiritual organism powered by divine placement.
Wow.
They are mapping the movement of the Spirit alongside the availability of a pickup truck. It merges the sacred and the practical into a single, unified view of the body.
So, by capturing all 5 of these categories within Giftscape Digital, we finally cure the amnesia. Let's revisit those 3 live failures from the sticky note era and see exactly how the operating system solves them.
Let's do it.
Failure number 1, the data did not compound.
Under the new infrastructure, the data does compound. When a new family joins the community in year 3, they don't walk into a room with rolled up butcher paper. They are given access to the communal map.
Right.
They immediately see what year 1 declared. They see the history, the skills, the aspirations. The historical memory of the body is preserved and accessible to everyone. The baseline of intelligence constantly rises.
Failure number 2, the one that causes so much burnout. Leadership transitions reset everything.
Entirely mitigated. The next pastor does not inherit a blank wall. They inherit a living, breathing, dynamically updated digital body of intelligence.
That's a game changer.
It is. Before they even preach their first sermon, before they even meet the elders, they can log into Giftscape Digital and see the exact granular makeup of the skills, aspirations, and spiritual gifts of the people they are called to lead. They don't have to spend 5 years guessing. They start on second base with a profound structural understanding of their congregation.
And failure number 3. The next congregation reinvented the wheel. The isolated silos.
Because Giftscape Digital is a shared field infrastructure, an operating system utilized across the wider movement, it creates a shared language. The canonical order of the 5 categories means that data can be anonymized, aggregated, and understood laterally.
Yeah.
The church, 2 miles down the road, isn't starting from zero. They can look at the aggregated learnings of the field. The methodology carries the intelligence forward across geographic boundaries.
This all drives toward the core philosophy that anchors this entire evolution. There's a phrase the steering document insists must be front and center in how we understand this transition, where faith is formed before it moves.
Where faith is formed before it moves, it is a profound statement regarding the sequencing of community action.
It really is, because almost every modern organization, whether secular or religious, is obsessively biased toward movement, action, scaling, doing more things, launching more programs, solving more problems immediately.
Always moving.
Always. But this framework pushes back hard. It insists that if you try to move before you are formed, if you try to build outreach programs before the body has actually seen itself, before it has recognized its own gifts, you're building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. The second half of that guiding principle clarifies the stakes, because what is formed is exactly what gets scaled.
That is the ultimate warning of the document. If you scale a community that has amnesia, you just get larger scale amnesia.
Right.
If you scale a community that relies entirely on a top-down leader, you just burn out the leader at a faster rate. But if you take the slow, difficult time to foster deeply rooted formation, if you let the body see itself in the room and then capture that intelligence in an infrastructure that holds it permanently, then when you finally move, when you finally scale, you are scaling a self-aware, deeply connected, endlessly resilient organism.
We have walked through the history.
Yeah.
We have honored the 30 years of the sticky note wall and the vulnerability it required. We have examined the profound limitations of physical paper and the systemic amnesia it inadvertently caused.
Yes.
And we have explored this evolution into a digital operating system, Giftscape Digital, that promises to hold the work over generations.
Yeah.
Now it's time to synthesize what this all means for you and how it changes your understanding of what a community is capable of.
As we transition into our final thoughts, it is vital to reiterate the posture of the document. Walking into the reality of Giftscape Digital is not presented as a sales pitch.
Right, there is no act now, artificial urgency.
Yeah, none. It is presented simply and humbly as the natural, long-awaited next step that the field of community organizing and spiritual formation has desperately needed to protect its own hard work. It is the necessary evolution from holding the moment to holding the work.
And that brings us to the closing recognition, a line from the text that summarizes this entire journey perfectly. After 30 years of butcher paper, of profound Saturday mornings, of lost data, exhausted leaders, and reinvented wheels, the realization is this: we have always done the right work, now we have a way to hold it.
It is a beautiful, peaceful culmination, and I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, something that stretches the implications of this digital infrastructure even further into the real world.
I always look forward to this. What are you thinking about?
We've talked extensively about how a field infrastructure like Giftscape Digital can permanently hold the communal memory of spiritual and physical gifts, but think about what happens when that specific community inevitably faces a sudden, severe crisis.
Okay, like what?
A natural disaster, an economic collapse, a sudden social trauma in their neighborhood. Traditionally, communities operating with amnesia immediately look outward in panic. They ask with intense anxiety, what do we lack? Who is going to save us? What do we need to ask the government or an outside agency for?
Because they are blind. They don't know they have a contractor, a nurse, and an empty warehouse sitting in their own pews.
Precisely. Their amnesia breeds dependence and fear. But if a body never suffers from amnesia, if it possesses an unbroken, generational, digitally accessible memory of its own immense installed capacity, how might that permanently alter its crisis response?
That's a huge question.
If the infrastructure holds the memory, the entire psychological paradigm of the community shifts. Instead of anxiously asking, what do we lack, they can look at their shared map, see the staggering abundance they already possess, and confidently ask, what are we already equipped to build?
What are we already equipped to build? It changes everything. It's the difference between holding a smartphone and thinking you only have a landline versus opening the dashboard and realizing you hold a supercomputer. When the power goes out or the crisis hits, you already have the tools, the fire, the skills, and the people in the room to survive it, and maybe even to build something beautiful out of the rubble. The wall held the moment, but the infrastructure holds the future.